Have you stubbornly dug your heels in, refusing to change your mind even when presented with new information? Or have you made a big decision based on a hunch only to regret it later? How about those times you vividly remember something and it turns out you were completely wrong? If so, you're not alone. All of us have experienced moments where our brains seem to work against us. It's like there are hidden forces sabotaging our best attempts to be logical. The good news is, there's a reason behind these mental mishaps. They're called cognitive biases. I'm your host, Danny, and I'm here to take you on an exciting journey into the fascinating world of your own mind. Cognitive biases are those subtle, sometimes sneaky, mental shortcuts that steer our thoughts and influence our actions. They're why we can be so incredibly irrational even when we think we're being smart. In this series, we're going to dive deep into some of the most common cognitive biases. We'll uncover why you can't stop clinging to that old, outdated belief even though it's been proven wrong, how the first number you hear in a negotiation could cost you thousands of dollars, and whether you really should trust your memory of that wild party 10 years ago. Get ready to be a little baffled and definitely learn a whole lot about how to overcome the quirks of your own mind. It's time to understand your biases so they don't end up driving you crazy. Let's get started. Now first, let's start with the big question. Before we start with the biases themselves, why should we learn about cognitive biases? Well, maybe I mentioned that in the introduction, but I guess it's important for you to really understand why it is important for us to understand and learn what cognitive biases are. Now, if you could have a superpower, what would that be? Flight? Super strength? Invisibility? While those would all be pretty cool, I'd argue there's a superpower far more valuable and one that's within your grasp: understanding the way your own mind works. Every day, we make countless decisions, both big and small. We form opinions, navigate relationships, and make plans for the future. But what if I told you that there are hidden forces constantly influencing your thinking? These forces are called cognitive biases, and they're like mental shortcuts that help our brain make sense of a crazy, complex world. The thing is, these shortcuts often lead us astray. Biases can make us see the world inaccurately, make irrational decisions, and misunderstand the motivations of others. Think of them like glitches in your brain's software, causing you to react and think in ways that don't always make logical sense. So why should you care about cognitive biases? Because understanding them is the key to making smarter choices, avoiding costly mistakes, and becoming a more critical thinker. Now, here are just a few reasons why learning about biases is so important. But first, you'll get to know yourself. You can't improve what you don't understand. Learning about biases reveals the hidden forces shaping your thoughts and actions, and that will also lead to better decision making. Biases can cloud our judgment. Recognizing them helps you make more rational and informed choices. Learning about them will also strengthen relationships. Biases can lead to misunderstanding and conflict in our interactions. Knowing them helps foster empathy and build better connections. And learning about biases will help us navigate a changing world. From news feeds to social media, we are bombarded with information. Biases distort reality. Understanding them helps you sort fact from fiction. So are you ready to unlock the superpower of understanding your own mind? Get ready, because we're about to go on an adventure. Let's explore the fascinating world of cognitive biases together. Now first, let's start with confirmation bias, why you only hear what you want to hear. Have you ever tried to convince a friend their favorite childhood movie is actually terrible? It probably went about as well as convincing a cat to wear a sweater. That's because our brains are wired for a phenomenon called confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is our tendency to favor information that confirms our existing beliefs and downplay or ignore evidence that contradicts them. Imagine you think your neighbor is a grumpy curmudgeon. Everything you see reinforces this belief. Maybe they never wave back, or they always seem to be yelling at their dog. However, you completely miss the times they're helping someone carry groceries or laughing in their yard. Your brain filters out anything that doesn't fit your existing grumpy neighbor theory. This bias pops up everywhere. Let's think about examples in politics. Are you a die-hard supporter of a certain political party? Do you find yourself only reading news sources that align with your views, dismissing anything critical of your side? That's confirmation bias at work. What about shopping? Let's say you're convinced a particular brand of skincare is the best. You probably seek out glowing reviews and before and after photos, ignoring any negative experiences or critical opinions. And confirmation bias can even color our own memories. If you had a negative experience with a person once, you might tend to recall future interactions with them as equally negative, forgetting any pleasant moments. So what can we do about this mental filter bubble we create for ourselves? Well, first, actively seek out opposing viewpoints. Don't just stick to news sources or social media feeds that confirm what you already believe. Make an effort to understand the other side of the argument. And play devil's advocate. Before completely dismissing information that contradicts your beliefs, try arguing in favor of it. This can help you identify weaknesses in your original thinking. And finally, question your memory. Just because you remember something a certain way doesn't mean it's entirely accurate. Could there be another perspective you've forgotten or overlooked? Think about that. And now, before we move on to the next bias in our series today, I would like to ask you some questions. Leave some questions for you to ponder. And for those questions, I would like you to answer them on your own, share them with your friends and family, and of course, you can share them with me. We can talk about these things. We can learn from each other. It's very important to answer these questions. If you don't want to share them, no problem, but at least answer them. Just tell yourself what you think. That will help you understand cognitive biases better and really use this information to make better decisions and to become a better person in general. And here are some questions to ponder. Can you think of a time when confirmation bias affected you? How can you be more open to considering evidence that contradicts your beliefs? And what are some strategies you can use to seek out a more balanced perspective? I will leave those questions to you, and of course, if you want to share your answers with me, I would love to have a discussion about these with you. Remember, I will have to say that again because you might underestimate awareness. Awareness is definitely the first step to solving so many problems, including cognitive biases that we all have. So that was about confirmation bias, but it's definitely not the end. We still have a lot of biases to cover, and next we're going to talk about anchoring bias. Don't go anywhere, I'll be right back. So we're talking about anchoring bias. Are you getting hooked by the first number? Have you ever walked into a negotiation feeling completely clueless about what to expect? Then the other person throws out a price or condition, and suddenly that number becomes your entire world. That's anchoring bias in action. Anchoring bias is our tendency to lock onto an initial piece of information, which is the anchor, and use it as our reference point for everything that follows. For example, imagine you're shopping for a used car. The first price you see, even if ridiculous, sets the tone for the whole negotiation. Suddenly, that too high number seems like a bargain compared to the dealer's inflated price tag. You might even be tricked into thinking you're getting a real deal. Now, this bias isn't just about money. Think wages, time estimates, or even social situations. Let's say you're meeting someone new and they seem a little standoffish at first. That initial impression can anchor your whole perception, even if they warm up later. So how do you protect yourself from the sneaky power of the anchor? Well, first, do your research. Arm yourself with as much information as possible going into any situation where an anchor might be used. Know the real value of the car, the fair salary range, or the standard repair time. And set your own anchor. When negotiating, be the first to throw out a number. This helps shift the playing field in your favor. And finally, question the anchor. Is the first piece of information offered truly relevant or accurate? Don't let yourself get hooked before you assess its validity. And before we move on to another bias, let's ponder these questions together. Have you ever been a victim of anchoring bias? How did it affect your decision making? What are some situations where you might want to be extra vigilant of anchors? And finally, how can you use the power of the anchor to your own advantage? So of course, you can pause and ponder on these questions, and I would love to hear from you about what you think. So that was about the anchoring effect. What's coming next? What's the next bias we're going to talk about? We're going to talk about the hindsight bias, the I knew it all along syndrome. So don't go anywhere. I'll be right back.
Love this preview? Ready to dive deeper? Unlock the full episode and a whole library of exclusive learning content by becoming a premium member on Patreon. Check the description for the link, or subscribe directly on Apple Podcasts for easy access to all of our premium episodes.